All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. We are live on AMP after that incredible game between the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics. Kind of a fun game, but a very sloppy game. We're going to dive into a bunch of different angles from this game. I want to talk a lot about Al Horford and Robert Williams and the way they dominated. I want to spend some time on Jayson Tatum and his very up and down night, mostly down, but then up at the end. And then I want to talk a little bit about the Warriors and something that I think tonight tells us a lot about what their strategy should be around the deadline. Those of you guys who are listening on YouTube or on the podcast feed, do not forget that the first place you guys can get these post-game breakdowns is on AMP. So let's talk some basketball. Again, this was a sloppy game. This didn't look a lot like the game that we had a few months ago, or I should say in early December, when the Warriors won it at the Chase Center, because in that game, most of the key characters were all kind of at the top of their game. I've spent just an enormous amount of time in the last couple of weeks talking about rhythm. And the main reason why is we've had so many players that have been out of their lineups for weeks and weeks with injuries. And then they come back, and like almost every single time, especially skill-oriented players, they really struggle with their ball handling and their shooting and their timing and their seeing the floor and all these different things when they've been away from the game for a long time. And particularly Jaylen Brown, nightmare game for the most part, although he made a bunch of big plays down the stretch. Andrew Wiggins, absolute nightmare game, missed a boatload of shots that he normally makes. Steph Curry, we saw a bunch of key highlights, and he made some huge plays down the stretch of this game. Hit another huge three in overtime to put the Warriors in front. But in the grand scheme of things, it was kind of like two mistakes or two missed shots for every big play that he made. No shame to Steph. He's just in his, fifth game back, coming back from the injury. And he, of all the players, is dependent on lift and rhythm and all those different things because he's such a skill-oriented player. Even in particular, after winning their last game, I was like, Steph put up big numbers. He had 40-something, but he didn't quite look like himself in terms of his lift and his finishing. Missed around the rim a couple times tonight as well. So it was kind of a sloppy game. I don't think either team should be feeling fantastic after this game, but obviously the Celtics should be feeling a bit better. But I think both teams have some positives they can take away. So I want to start with the Celtics because this was the first step in getting over their mental issues with the Warriors. We've seen this a lot throughout NBA history. Sometimes teams never get over those mental issues. Just ask the DeMar DeRozan Toronto Raptors, who pretty consistently were every bit as good, if not better, in the regular season than the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then just got their ass kicked by them every single year. And Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan just would look like shells of themselves. You even saw that with the LeBron team in 2020 with the Lakers. Really struggled with the Clippers to start that year to the point where they were kicking everyone else's ass. And then in that matchup, they just couldn't get a win. And you guys probably remember the Christmas Day game where Patrick Beverley stripped LeBron James on the right wing when he tried to take a shot to win the game. They were kicking everybody's ass, and they just couldn't handle the Clippers. But then they actually got over that hump. They won a game against the Clippers right before the bubble. Then they won a game against the Clippers in the bubble, and then they went on to win the championship. And it remains to be seen for Boston because I thought there was a lot of negative here. Their late game execution was a total mess still if it wasn't for some shot making at the end of the game from Al Horford and from Jaylen Brown off of some nice kick out passes from Marcus Smart and Jayson Tatum. They could have been in a much worse place. I guarantee you Warriors fans in particular are frustrated that they lost this one and probably felt like they should have got it. But there was enough positive from this game that I do think it was a significant step in the right direction. They had lost 4 consecutive games to the Golden State Warriors. And, it's funny because this particular mental advantage as it pertains to the Celtics with the Warriors doesn't make a ton of sense to me, especially for Jayson Tatum, because this is a matchup they should feel extremely comfortable in. This is a matchup where they have distinct advantages. If you were looking down from the surface, from above at the matchups in this particular dynamic, they're way bigger at almost every single position. I think Golden State has more top-end skill, but down the roster when it comes to ball handling and shooting, like how many teams in the league have guys like Derek White and Marcus Smart as their 4th and 5th most skilled players, or, depending on where you put Malcolm Brogdon and all that. Like, this team has every reason to be extremely confident in this particular matchup. My guess is that it mostly has to do with experience and execution. confidence is everything in the game of basketball. I'll give you an example, and we're going to talk more about Jayson Tatum in a little bit. But there was a play right towards the end of regulation where Jayson Tatum had Steph Curry on a switch on the left wing. And he, had a triple threat, all sorts of space to operate. No one's digging into driving lanes. He's got all the space in the world. Now, he's 6'10 or 6'9 or whatever he is, and Steph is 6'3. And so the ideal thing to do there is to try to turn your back to the basket, try to back him down to the elbow. And if you're going to take a jump shot, maybe it's a shorter jump shot where your size is more of an advantage. And instead, he looks super indecisive and doesn't know what to do. And he kind of like takes a really weak sidestep to the left dribble, and Steph is right there with him in his shooting pocket. And then he rises up to he's going to shoot and then changes his mind and passes it at the last second. That is Jayson Tatum in a situation where he has a big time advantage over a good defender in Steph Curry, but a defender that has a significant size disadvantage in that matchup. And Jayson Tatum didn't even look to use his size as an advantage. And that goes to show you that confidence just isn't quite there. As a team, I think in their late game execution, Boston had a bunch of sloppy turnovers at the end of this game. Jayson Tatum, just 3 ridiculous turnovers in the final minutes of this game. There was a play in overtime where when Golden State was down 3 and they just scored to get it back to 3, and they damn near threw it out of bounds again. And Jaylen Brown had to vault himself into the damn scorer's table to launch it back in bounds to save the possession, and they ended up winning the game from there. But there is a distinct lack of confidence for the Celtics just within this matchup. And ideally, you go out there tonight and you kick the Warriors' ass and the monkey's off your back. And instead, it was kind of a more mild victory than that. They won, but it was a win where it was very sloppy and Jayson Tatum didn't play well and you didn't execute down the stretch of the game, and a lot of your ugly tendencies came to the surface. So it's a little bit disappointing from that standpoint. But in the grand scheme of things, a baby step in the right direction is better than a step in the wrong direction. Particularly, I wanted to talk about Al Horford and Robert Williams, because when nobody else was playing well for Boston, Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, just awful games tonight in the grand scheme of things, although they both made huge plays down the stretch. Al Horford and Robert Williams carried them early in this game. And, I talk a lot about in the playoffs about versatility. And what that means is the ability to play different ways, right? It's something that I frequently look at with teams. It's like the Bucks. They can play huge with Brook Lopez and Giannis, or they could put Giannis at center and they could play a completely different brand of basketball that's a little bit more 5 out, right? And a little bit more switch heavy on defense. And that's kind of the dynamic that the Celtics can give you. You saw that. Ideally, what you want from the Celtics is you want Al Horford at center, and you want Malcolm Brogdon with Marcus Smart and the 2 J's, and you're playing 5 out basketball, and you're doing a lot of switching, and and the offense is flowing, and you're playing good basketball on both ends of the floor. But in a game where Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown aren't playing well, you need to turn it into a rock fight. And they did that by staying big and keeping Robert Williams and Al Horford out there for large portions of the game. And then what did they do? They just absolutely pulverized the Warriors on the offensive glass all game long. If there's a big silver lining for the Warriors, it's you were this close to winning this game, probably should have, and you got absolutely demolished physically in almost every phase of the game. But that's what makes me so excited about Boston. That's the reason why, even though I've been pessimistic about their late game struggles and I've been pessimistic about their ultimate ceiling, and yes, even after tonight, I still have them as my 3rd best championship contender behind the Bucks and the Warriors. Celtics fans, we've talked about that at length. I don't need to get into it again. But the point is they have many different ways they can play. They have tons of ball handling and shooting. They have perimeter size, which is something that I've always valued a great deal because of your ability to cover ground in rotations and grab contested rebounds and run out in transition. They've got every single box checked except for that just veteran savvy and IQ and late game execution to help them close the deal. Or more importantly, to look at a team like the Warriors and be like, we're bigger and we're better than you, and we're going to play like it instead of playing beneath our capability and giving you a chance to win, particularly down the stretch of this game. Boston's physical advantages carried them. Key offensive rebounds, even in OT, they get a stop. Down 3, should have a chance to go tie the game, but Robert Williams once again draws a foul trying to grab an offensive rebound. 2 possessions in OT where you play perfect defense, but Jaylen Brown just rips through to the middle. Defenders walled up in front of him, but he's 6'8" and freaky athletic, and the guy he's going against is not. and he's just going to pop a little floater over the top of him. That's the type of thing that you need to succeed in those rock fights. And again, that's going to be the big advantage for Boston in most of their playoff matchups. They can play a rock fight. They can play a beautiful 5-out style of basketball. Everything with me for them comes down to their confidence against the best opponents in the league in their late game execution. And I didn't see enough tonight. And Celtics fans, you're probably pulling your own hair out at the way they played at the end of that game. Until they rectify that issue on a playoff stage, I can't vault them above teams like the Bucks and the Warriors that are proven playoff performers down to the moment when they had the Larry O'Brien in their hands. Talking about Jayson Tatum for a quick second, then we're going to move on to the Warriors. Again, he made a bunch of big plays in this game. He had a big pullback jumper on Steph Curry towards the end of regulation. That was really the great separation, great lift, knocked it down. He had a pivotal pass to Al Horford on the three that came before the Jaylen Brown three to tie the game. A really nice cross-court pass when he was downhill, hit him in the shooting pocket. In OT, drew a foul driving past Andrew Wiggins, hit a really nice pull-up three. I think it was on Draymond Green. Like, he made a lot of big plays in this game, so I want to be clear. But man, I just don't understand why he struggles so much in this matchup. There were two plays there in the fourth quarter where he was just carelessly throwing cross-court passes that were easily picked off by Warriors because he's just not paying attention. So I don't know what it is that makes him a shell of himself against this team. But once again, I want to go positive here and say that I'd rather take a baby step in the right direction than a step in the wrong direction. And tonight for Tatum, with as big of a chasm as he needs to cover with this particular matchup, it was a positive step in that direction. And if the Celtics, I have not seen anything from any team in the West to make me think the Warriors are losing. So at this point, you're going to probably have to deal with this matchup when you get to the finals if you're the Celtics. So a baby step in that right direction is a good thing. So moving on to the Warriors, this game in particular was such a great example of why I think the Warriors need to go all in at this deadline and move Moses Moody and move James Wiseman and get back a bench big or a big athletic forward, anything that can help them in these physical areas of the game. I talk a lot about the value of top-end talent in this league. And, even when it looked like it might shift the other way with the Phoenix Suns, you saw Chris Paul and Devin Booker get outplayed by Giannis and get outplayed by Luka, and then all of their talent not mattering. So at the end of the day, top-end talent still determines things in this league. But there is, as I always say, there is a list of responsibilities that need to be filled on the court. And even your out-of-rhythm Steph Curry, bad game from Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson was awesome in the first half, not much from him in the second half. But even with all of that, your skill elements of the game were far beyond Boston in this particular game. But you lost because in the physical areas of the game, as it pertained to shooting over the top of defensive players or grabbing contested rebounds, you got absolutely mauled. And so it's like I've been talking about with the Lakers all season long. Don't overthink it. Don't get looking down at the rest of the roster and be like, oh, there's just not enough talent. It's not worth it. Let's look to the future. Because I feel like Joe Lacob is doing that. I feel like Joe Lacob is looking at this group and thinking it's the 2021 Warriors and thinking that it's not worth it and punting it into the future and not wanting to give up the assets. And what he's missing is that the core at the top of this lineup is more than enough to win a championship. When you look at Steph, Klay, Jordan Poole, Draymond Green, Kevon Looney, Andrew Wiggins, that group of six is the top six that just won an NBA championship. And a huge part of why you're losing right now is the back end of that roster doesn't have the requisite athleticism, experience, and basketball IQ to round everything out. And especially on a team like this where Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole are not physical specimens that are going to dominate games physically, you've got to bring them reinforcements on that end of the floor. Now, to be clear, Jonathan Kuminga missed this game. Jonathan Kuminga has been playing really good basketball for the Warriors for a while, and he specifically addresses that need to a certain extent. I think he's that big athletic forward that they need, but I think they need a backup center, somebody that gives them a better chance to hang with the Horford-Williams lineup. And again, like Draymond Green, one of the best defensive players of all time, but he's not going to be able to jump with Robert Williams. And so if you're going to ask him to battle with Robert Williams all night long, or if he's running up and tagging on people driving to the basket downhill, you need additional size and athleticism to give you a better chance to grab those contested rebounds and win some of those physical battles around the rim. So bottom line is that top 6, you literally might never, ever have a top 6 like that again in franchise history. Statistically speaking, the chances of you getting Steph Curry, a top 5 player of all time, in my opinion, and Draymond Green, a top 3 or 4 defensive player of all time, Klay Thompson, the second best shooter of all time. The odds of you lining that up again through the draft or through trades is extremely small. So your patience, as it were, or whatever it is that you view the future of this franchise, is not squeezing every bit of juice out of this orange. And I still think there's juice in this orange. Same thing I've been saying about the Lakers. When LeBron James is this good and Anthony Davis is this good, you might not. The last time they had that was Shaq and Kobe 20 years ago. If you move on past this year, you might not ever have that again. Give them just the handful of things they need to help carry them in the other phases of the game, and your top-end talent will carry you over the top. I genuinely believe that, first of all, even if the Warriors don't do anything, I think they have a really good chance to win the West. But if you're going to beat one of these teams out of the East, the Bucks, the Nets, or the Celtics, or heck, the Sixers look incredible. If you're going to beat those teams, you need to give them reinforcements, particularly in size and athleticism off the bench. Again, tying a note on tying this one off, I don't think either team should be feeling great about tonight, but I do think both teams should be feeling a little bit better than they did yesterday. All right, guys, that is all I have for tonight. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys supporting the show. We have one more show this week. Tomorrow night, we're going to be doing the usual breakdown of all the games on Friday night, but that will actually be on the feeds on Saturday morning. I've got some more quick hitters for you when we get to that show as well. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys supporting the show, and I'll see you tomorrow.